Set my heart afire. Heart on fire.
Hi everybody, David Dilling from Markzware here. Welcome to this event. We're going to kick it off in just a moment here, just to let some people roll in. Over on my left, I guess your right, will be the chat area. And there we'll be monitoring live, and you can ask questions and get responses in real time. What a year 2020. I mean, who thought we'd be sitting here doing these type of events as a norm and not just as the, every once in a while thing to do. Pretty incredible, really. I hope you're all well. Once again, my name is David Dilling. I've worked here at Markzware for, 24 years. I just saw my LinkedIn, thingamahoo anniversary. So it's been incredible. We'll get to a little bit about Markzware's history in a moment here, just real briefly. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, here's my LinkedIn address. Maybe that's a good idea. Just share your LinkedIn profile right over here in the chat area. Just, copy and paste your LinkedIn profile right over there, and we start connecting right here and now, It's a great way to share experiences. Maybe even you have jobs you can help each other with, or in any event, tips and tricks. It's good to network, right? So share them over in the chat section. That's kind of maybe a cool idea. All right, so let's jump into the presentation here. Once again, chat room, ask your questions. Myself and others will be monitoring that live and be able to answer your questions. If there's something we cannot answer, we'll get back to you on that later. We're going to pick one lucky winner from the attendees here. So let's jump right in. InDesign 2. That's what I like best about working at Markzware, is that the founders, still active in the company today, Patrick as CEO, Ron Crandall as chief engineer, doing an incredible job, and they come directly from the graphic arts business, publishing, graphic design, advertising studios, so they really know all about desktop publishing, design, printing, publishing. So this is really nice, and that's been really great. Learned so much over the years. Okay, the Markzware products. All right, FlightCheck is our flagship product, which we're revamping right now. Q to ID, of course, everyone knows. Quark to InDesign, that's a plugin for InDesign. PDF T2P is another very popular plugin for PDF, native multi-page PDFs to InDesign. And of course, the new product we're going to see more about here in a moment, IDMarkz, the first in our Markz line, our new Markz line. And another one that just came out in June at Creative Pro Week is QuarkXPress, which will do the same thing you're going to see today, but with Quark files. Very interesting as well, because there are millions of legacy Quark files out there, literally. And that's our complete line. Like I said, FlightCheck will be revamped soon. Check back maybe end of the year next year. And PDFMarkz is next in line to come out, which we'll touch on at the end of this presentation. All right, IDMarkz. Just a very quick, let's say 40,000 foot view of what is IDMarkz first before we dive into a real live demo here. It's the first of the Markz line, which I just mentioned, and it will allow you to transition your InDesign files in multiple ways. First and foremost, it provides a preview, which, by the way, the preview feature is totally free, so your colleagues can use IDMarkz completely free for those that don't have InDesign. And it's extremely useful to get a high-resolution, detailed preview of your InDesign file. And we're going to touch more on this preview feature in a moment, because it's also a powerful pro feature as well. And I think there's some surprising little tips and tricks in this section too. But it's a great way to get an overview of the file info and the preview for marketing and salespeople, but also professional InDesign users alike. You just drop it on IDMarkz and you get the preview. By the way, for all of this, you don't need even InDesign loaded. Helps if you do, if you are an InDesign user. We have a lot of connections to InDesign and other applications, as you'll see. The other, we call it the top 3 features of InDesign. Top 3. InDesign has a lot more than 3 features, right? The top 3 features of IDMarkz, which there's more features in that as well, but our preview and export is the next one we're going to cover here. And there you'll see we have a host of exporting options. Yeah, this is also very powerful. some very useful things here for, once again, InDesign pros, as well as those in marketing or management as well. And lastly, we do the conversion, the transition, as we call it, because in some cases there's help from other applications to finalize the process. And we primarily, that's with our file open features, which there's a host of, and there's many more possible. These are just the ones we highlight and provide direct links to InDesign, Quark Publisher, Acrobat, and Illustrator. And we'll get into this in a moment. So that's the 40,000 foot overview. As you can see, a very useful tool for InDesign users and for those transitioning to other DTP application types, which we just very briefly touched on. So now let's actually dive into a live demonstration of IDMarkz and show you how it works. So for that, I've got to get out of a keynote here and cruise on over into the my desktop. I hope it's clean. All right, so welcome to my desktop. It's rather clean, actually. Love that Catalina picture. In any event, I have IDMarkz down on my dock here. If I click on it, you'll see the interface is rather basic, actually. You can drag your file on here and the magic will start, so to speak. I'm just going to check it out here under About IDMarkz so I can see if I have the latest version. And I don't. So I'll show you how to install IDMarkz. Actually, I'm updating here, of course, but the installation is the same. Once you get the product, you just drag and drop it into your applications folder or via the installer via the hyperlink here. It's that easy. In this case, I want to replace the one that I have and get the latest version. Replace. You do it to launch it to officially activate it. It needs an internet connection, and it will ask you the standard Apple stuff. And there we go. Now we're ready to go. You can show this window on launch or not. It's quite simple. I'm just going to take this test file here to start with to show you how it works. You just drop the file on IDMarkz on the interface or on the icon down below, whichever you like. And then you get this nice preview, which you can expand to make as big as you like. You can then zoom in and get intricate details about your file. It's a great way to check out what's going on in your file without outputting it. You can, of course, go page by page and do the same. And there's a lot of cool things you can do as well. For instance, you can take this column here and increase it in size to make the thumbnails bigger to get a better idea if you just want to browse through quickly to find particular content you're after. Like, oh yeah, I'm after the Q to ID testimonials here. Click on that and you can quickly check out what it's all about. You can drag and drop that onto your desktop, and you could then send this off to your marketing colleague or your management team, whatever it might be. So I'm jumping ahead of myself showing you a couple things, but I just want to show you how the interface is highly adjustable in the preview mode. Now, preview is completely free. Anyone can download on our webpage. And it acts sort of as a demo. You can see how the IDML will output with this preview. Now, the IDML and the preview can slightly vary. It's pretty accurate. The IDML might actually output better than the preview. Sometimes the other way around, but that's another story. And of course, you get a full file info, which we'll dive into in a moment here. So that's just a quick, how to get started with IDMarkz. Out of the box, it's quite easy. Make sure you have the latest version, and it works just like that. You can always check for the latest version on your download URL you would have received when you purchased. There you can always go to and make sure you have the latest version. So that's the first little part. Now let's dive into some more intricate details about IDMarkz, and in particular about the preferences. Now I'm going to jump back and forth between the preferences in this presentation. The first part I want to show you just the basics of the preferences, and that is show welcome window and launch on or off. I like to have it, just makes it more visual. And enable Finder thumbnail previews. It's very interesting. If you enable that, your InDesign files, like you see here on my desktop, will actually get a preview, like Quark files have. Like you see here, this Quark file, it has a little preview thumbnail, like PDFs have and image files have, and through IDMarkz, we can install something to allow that to happen for you as well. QuickTime plugin to help you do that on the Macintosh. So, obviously we're creating a full high-resolution preview of the file natively here, mind you. This is not built into InDesign. It can be, that's going to be often low-res and fuzzy and what have you. We're creating our own previews here, which you see all natively. It's all standalone technology from Markzware. Refer tabs and opening documents. That's an interesting one as well. We'll show you that in a moment. Show inspector panel, that's this. If you don't want that, you turn that off. Display units in various measures. And animation speed, normal. You can reset your preference there as well. And the rest we'll get into in a moment here. Let's now click this one, preferred tabs and opening document. Let's quit out of IDMarkz and see what happens. So when I relaunch IDMarkz, you'll see now I'm going to take two files here, and I'm going to drop them both on IDMarkz. And now what happens is they open up in tabs, just like in InDesign or what have you. You can move this file info out of the way like that. So now you get these tabs here, and you can cruise between different documents. Now this could be very handy. I just want to show you something else real quick here. Let's say I have two different InDesign files, and they might have totally, non-descriptive names. These have pretty descriptive names. If I would click on them, you would see very quickly that this says 2020, this says 2019, so kind of blows the demo. But let's pretend like we don't know what the names are. But if we would drop those then on IDMarkz, we get these tabs here. Again, both files opened. And we can then see the evolution of this file. This was a very early version, and the main content was pretty good, but the cover was terrible. I mean, look at that, just looks terrible. And we can very quickly see, well, this is the one we need. That's quite obvious. This is the one. The old one we don't need. So I could then concentrate on this file, export to IDML, or whatever I need to do, which we'll get to in a moment as well. By the way, you can also flip up that and you can get a totally different view, which is kind of neat too. Some people might like that better. And the same thing down below here. Now, the advantage or disadvantage of tabs can be very useful, so you're just having different files and what have you. But if we go back to preferences and turn off the tabs, we restart IDMarkz, and we take the same two files again. What you'll now see is there is no tabs, comparing previews in two totally different windows. Now the advantage is I could actually get these two right next to each other. I can get rid of that so we can actually see. Now this might be quite obvious, but maybe you might want to look at more specific details like table of content. Okay, so obviously there's a big difference. We can see right away the main things, but if you really need to get nitty gritty, you're looking for specific versions or things like that, this next to each other might be more handy than having a tab view. So that's the advantage of having a tab view or not having a tab view. So that's pretty neat. So that is a quick way to get your previews here. Get a nice overview, a nice preview. You can make it as big and as high resolution as you like. So it's a very useful way to just drill down into your file and see what's going on in your file. So that's preview, and as you see, it's extremely handy and totally free. That's the first part of the demonstration. All right, so now we have that dealer sales guide back open again, and the next part I want to touch on, actually two parts, but the first one is a main feature we added in, and that's the, well, as you saw in the preferences, we call that the show inspector panel, the inspector panel. Some people call it a little Preflight tab, but it's not really Preflight because it's not necessarily telling you what to check against, just giving you file information. The file info window would be a better way to call it maybe as well. That's like a little inspector panel indeed, you know. And once again, you can totally just detach that file info to have it floating freely if you needed to. And the details are really useful. Right away, we can see which version it is. So if it's a lower version, or if it's a higher version, we have a lower version in InDesign on this machine, well, then we know the next steps we'll have to take, which you'll see in a moment in the demo, or you'll know what you can or cannot do with that file in general. You don't need InDesign to get any of this detail, so that's very useful for others maybe too. If you do have InDesign, we can dive in a moment how we connect to InDesign. But you'll see we get the size, created on, modified dates, etc. The information on the print details, the size of the page, etc., or pages. The fonts that are used, missing or inactive, the colors used, and in the file in general. Number of images used. If any are missing, it would show up here. That is like a Preflight, of course, an old mini Preflight. And the number of stories in the file. So some very interesting information. And is touching on Preflight a little bit, and that's what one user of ours, Amy Beth Menendez, you can see some of the interviews we had with Amy Beth on IDMarkz on YouTube. We can share that video with you, but what you have with IDMarkz is a way to visually pre-flight your file. Yeah, check this out. So here we have this cover again, better than the last cover at least, or the first version you saw earlier. But if you cruise in, what do you see right away? Well, I see some real crisp graphics, and then I see that the Markzware logo of all things is, yeah, jaggedy. JPEG, low quality or lower quality JPEG, or use at a size that's not meant to. It's been, scaled up, and it just won't display perfectly at certain resolutions. Now, obviously, for general visibility, it's okay. You can see how we can use IDMarkz to be a visual pre-flight tool as well, because we can zoom right in there, and we can even see, well, this image is also kind of shady if we want to get right down into it. Once again, at resolution used is fine, but you see it's a lot different than the text here, which is crisp and clear, even zoomed in at 350%. So the feature of zooming in can be a great way to help you visually pre-flight your file and ensure that you have crisp graphics like this Markzware logo is here, that the fonts are going to output correctly and not be shady or fuzzy or anything like that. So this is a little side feature that the file inspector is useful, but you can use it as a deeper tool to inspect your file with the preview option as well. And this is really like, let's say, a pro tip, because it can be very useful. And I didn't even really notice this on the logo. I kind of did, but now that I see it like this, I'm thinking, well, I really have to swap this out for the next version and use a higher quality logo, higher JPEG quality, use a ping, what have you. It's got to look better than that, and it can. So that's neat, a little way to visually pre-flight your file, or inspect your file is maybe the better term, with both the inspector panel and with the preview feature. All right, now what we'll do, we'll stick with the dealer sales guide here. Pop that back open. Don't know why I closed it. Now we're going to go on to the next part of IDMarkz, one of the top 3 features I was talking about earlier. We have the preview we just saw, which we include the file inspector in. Now we have the export, which there's various ways you can export your files out of IDMarkz. I'm going to hit some of the main ways, probably more than I'll be able to cover right now, because it's already getting to be quite a long demo. Such a simple tool, but it has so many intricate parts you can use and benefit from, so I don't want to miss anything. So in addition to these like standard things, we could click export from here. We could just export as IDML, which a lot of people are using IDMarkz for really out of the box, whether they have lower versions of InDesign or just want to, archive their InDesign files as IDML to protect them, or to remove corruption. That's one of the most popular things, exporting as IDML. Export as PDF is also a very interesting one. You just export right away out of a PDF out of your InDesign file without even having InDesign opened or loaded. Very handy for sharing content. We also have the same thing here, which I like to use, because when I click export here, you get this window. And by the way, if you do it here, you get the same window. We use the shortcuts. And then you get your main methods or possibilities of exporting your InDesign files in IDMarkz. IDML, that's quite clear. You can even set it up after the export to open automatically in a specific application. IDML, of course, opens in InDesign, but it might open, or you might want to have it open in specific versions of InDesign. IDML can also be opened by other tools, such as, of course, Affinity Publisher, which we have, QuarkXPress, and there's other desktop publishing systems that will import IDML. So you might want to have here a custom app, or you might want to send it to you can have it show in Finder. You could close a document when you're done after exporting. So it's all very cool. And what happens is you click export, you ask it where you want it to go. I'm going to put it down to my desktop here. You can do your tags, of course. Never understood those tags. Anyone knows a really good use for Apple, the tags when you're doing a file save, let me know. I sometimes tag files, but I've never really went back and searched based on tags. I'm not really sure how that tag feature is really useful. In any event, side thing. So now we get here the IDML that's output. And that IDML will now open, of course, in InDesign, so desired. I'm not going to do it right now. We'll jump into that in a moment. You can also export to PDF. Once again, this is not going to have all your fonts loaded necessarily, or all your images connected. This file happens to be quite clean, so it should output quite decently, but not everyone's going to have that. And the post-export possibilities are once again open in, specific applications, close, etc. You can export as pages or spreads, separate files, transparent backgrounds, etc. And when you hit export, you're now going to get a PDF of this file. Here's the folder. And there's my PDF. See, it's resolving its size there. And I kick that open, you'll see it looks quite decent. A little bit lower res in some areas than if I output from InDesign itself, but all said and done, it's quite decent. So this is a very interesting way to quickly export an InDesign file as a PDF for viewability without having the Adobe applications. Next in line, we have some image formats. You can export as TIFF, PNG, JPEG, and GIF. And with PNG, you get, of course, the transparent background possibility, which is cool. PNGs, of course, preserve transparency. On all the options, you get the open in. Could be useful. Export as TIFFs and open in. Let's try that. We'll try opening up the PNGs that are exported into Affinity Photo. Could, of course, do Photoshop, etc. Now we'll see Affinity Photo launching. Get rid of all those dialogues, and you see now we have everything automatically opened in a photo editor. Do the same with Photoshop, Preview, whatever you want to use. So that's pretty cool. So you can file export and open in specific applications. You could also just say system default and do the same thing. Now it opens in preview. We can go in there and do whatever we want to do. So export to various image formats with various post-exporting options. And another new one we added recently is the export the stories. and we can export the text stories used in the document in various formats: RTF, text, and HTML. So as RTF, open a specific default application. You can even choose specific applications, of course, again, or we could just say don't open it at all on anything. We would export RTF. We're going to choose the desktop again. And now we get something that, as a marketing person, I said, well, all I need is a text out of this file. I want to regurgitate the text to use in various, posts or what do you call it, on our web page or whatever it might be. For instance, this marketing text. Okay, I just want to get the marketing text like it is, formatted, so I could just copy and paste parts I need and reuse this in whatever way I want. So it even has the hyperlinks. So very cool. Export to RTF. But you can also export the text stories to plain text or to HTML. Plain text is quite obvious. Let's open in specific application. Let's do that in Firefox. So we're going to export the text stories as HTML, stylized HTML. Launching Firefox. And now we see all the text used in that document exported as stylized HTML. So pretty cool. The HTML is quite clear, just standard HTML, nothing too fancy there. But in any event, cool ways to export your text in various formats to be regurgitated, to be reused, to reuse your content the way you want to use it, to free up your content. So those are the various exporting options, IDML being most popular, and PDF. Interesting one. Image formats, pretty popular as well, and the text stories. Now, before we go too far into leaving exporting, there's other ways to export in some very unique ways. But you can also take any particular thumbnail preview that we've generated and drag and drop it onto your desktop, which you saw me do earlier. And I can then get that file, and I could actually then, of course, export as whatever you need to use it for, whether it's PDF or PNG or whatever it might be. So that's a pretty cool little way to get your content to be used for other purposes than just in the InDesign world. It could be used in social media. It could be used for instance, just for a quick way to view content. But this is a seriously good way if you want to, as a marketing person, use this file in social media. You have it right there, ready to go. Now, there's another way to use in social media, which it brings up a sort of a, side feature, which we have, which if you go to the contextual menu and you go share, you can actually share to various other ways to transfer the file. AirDrop, mail, send a mail message, messages. We also like Twitter. So I can now say source, and we could just then tweet that out. So I just took content that's locked up in an InDesign file, me as someone without InDesign in this example, and boom. Now what's cool, if I cruise into Twitter, which I didn't even have open to do this, it's all built into the contextual menu with the Mac OS. If I go in and look, there's my tweet. I mean, isn't that just the coolest thing, and it gives you the full Monty, the full big image. So a very handy way to reuse your InDesign content, to share it out in various methods other than just traditional ways. That's also possible up here under File, Share. You'll get the same thing where you can do that. You can add in your system preferences more share options. All right, so that was export with the bonus of share, and you saw a lot of great ways to export your InDesign content after previewing it to various other mediums such as IDML, PDF, even your text as HTML or RTF stylized, and you can share your files out to social media. Okay, that's really cool, huh? You can preview and you can export with some other cool things like sharing and what have you. But now on to probably one of the main reasons many of you got IDMarkz, or at least a lot of you, are the open-in features. Let's go check those out. So up top in IDMarkz right away, you'll notice when you have a file previewed, you'll get various options. InDesign Quark Publisher, that's Affinity Publisher, not Microsoft Publisher. Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat, and Adobe Illustrator. Quite clear with the icons what they are for most of them. You also have open in, and you have the various options right here spelled out for you. Yeah. So now what I want to do is I want to take this document I have here, and I want to swap out that low res image. So I want to open this file in Adobe InDesign 2020, which I'm using, latest version, and I just then click right here, open in InDesign. You'll see it's launching InDesign down below. Oops, that's a bad file from earlier today. Sorry about that. And I should update links, but don't worry about that right now. So now it's going to open up that file right up in InDesign. And you know, this was neat. You know, the logo looks fine in InDesign, but we saw here it's quite clearly not so dandy in the actual final exported product, or in the preview mode in this case. So I can now go in there and I can swap out this logo, and I can do that right now. But anyway, you see how you can actually cruise in from IDMarkz right into InDesign with a click. Now, what's cool about this open in InDesign is if you have a lower version of InDesign, it will actually create an IDML for you, so it will open in a lower version. It will open in CS6, CC 2018, whatever you're using, a lower version, it'll open the InDesign file for you. Natively, the InDesign files won't open in lower versions automatically. So that's a very handy, useful purpose of IDMarkz, to open in lower versions of InDesign as well as current versions for users, on the most current version. So we'll go back to these preferences here for a moment. But under the open in section, you'll see that we have always use system default application, but you can also say open in always use a specific install. So in opening Adobe InDesign, you could actually say use a particular version of InDesign. We can also do open in QuarkXPress. You see, once again, it writes the IDML in the background and will then import that into QuarkXPress automatically. So we're opening QuarkXPress 2019. It'll also work with 2020. And there we have it. It's now opened up that InDesign file in Quark. So it's also, apart from a InDesign downsaver like Markz Tools was before, now it's right in IDMarkz, downsaving InDesign files or opening InDesign files in your current version of InDesign. It's also a way to convert InDesign to QuarkXPress, like our old ID to Q used to do, InDesign to Quark. Now you have InDesign to Quark right in IDMarkz. So for Quark users, it could be interesting to have IDMarkz to convert your native InDesign files without having IDML already exported into Quark via the IDML. So very handy. There it is, all right there for you ready to use and abuse. Let's get out of there. And of course, the big one right here is to take your native .indd file, or you see right here, and open it right up in Affinity Publisher with a click. Boom. Once again, writes the IDML in the background. We're going to fire up Affinity Publisher down below. You see it right here popping up. You see up top, it's loading the document. It's a pretty big document, that dealer sales guide. And there we go. Converted right on over from native.indd file, an InDesign file, of any version, this will IDMarkz work with any version of InDesign. And right up there for you. And you go in there and you can now edit, whatever you want to edit. It's your file now. It's your Affinity Publisher file. And there's a lot more, intricate things you get into, but in a nutshell, that's how it works. Quite simple, quite effective, and extremely useful for those that don't want to continue with the Adobe subscription and want to switch fully over to Affinity Publisher. Now, I understand Affinity Publisher might not be for everybody. A lot of publishers aren't going to be switching to Affinity Publisher anytime soon, even though a publisher might want to use a publisher, right? Yeah. Bad joke, right? Anyway, publishing is slow to move. And quite frankly, InDesign is very powerful. That is certainly for long documents. That's where Affinity Publisher might still fall a little bit short. But as we saw in the presentation here from Mike Rankin, Mike gave this presentation at the recent Creative Pro conference where he did an Adobe InDesign versus Affinity Publisher, kind of, He went over it in great detail, and you can email him for this file in full, or tweet him, But he basically went over what are some of the things you can do in one and not in the other. And you see that there's a lot of areas where, but he gave a great presentation on why he actually loves Affinity Publisher as well. And he really loved IDMarkz to be able to be used in combination with, here's Mike, a picture of Mike here. We made a little social media push because he made a nice IDMarkz highlight during that presentation at Creative Pro Week. Very nice of Mike, but he really loved it. And you can check out that video. I'll put a link down below as well. And he had this PDF, which he handed out to people, to folks at the event. And he once again, one of his 10 points for converting InDesign to Publisher was, if you don't have Creative Cloud subscription, you generate IDML files with IDMarkz. So that's a good recommendation from an industry expert, Mr. Mike Rankin, editor of Creative Pro Week, LinkedIn learning expert. I think he does trainings on there as well for InDesign, Affinity Publisher as well, Illustrator, you name it. He's a real all-around expert. Right, so that's how you open InDesign files, native InDesign files in Publisher. Now you can also open native InDesign files in Acrobat. And what's cool about this is you can then annotate the file, and actually those annotations will then be able to be read in InDesign CC 2020. Lower versions won't read the annotations, like CC 2018 won't do that. But if you add annotations here, you'll be able to actually read those into your InDesign file. And that's really kind of cool. The last export I'm going to feature before we go into the general stuff on in the file open, I'm going to feature is Illustrator. You can open InDesign files right in Illustrator. In the background, we'll sometimes use PDF and or IDML as the transfer format. So this is not the optimal way. You could better redesign. But in some cases, you might just want to use certain elements of a more intricate. Some people use InDesign for intricate line drawing, stuff like that. You might want to then take it into Illustrator and go further with it. There's obviously not something you necessarily need in Illustrator. But you can see how you could go in here and, get rid of certain things and just use certain parts of the elements in Illustrator. And all right, so those are the main open-in features. Now, what we're going to now do is jump into more advanced background on the IDMarkz or possibilities, the more advanced possibilities of IDMarkz under the preferences, and in particular under the automation tabs. So we went over the general preferences, and now we're going to jump into some of the other ones. The open in Adobe InDesign is where you can actually set up to open in a specific version, like we just showed you on this little icon here. You can actually use a specific version here to open in a lower version. Or particularly if you have multiple versions of InDesign, then you can choose exactly which version you want to have it in. So press dialogues is a good one too. You don't get all those dialogues like you saw in some cases. The IDML tab is create low-res previews. That's good for missing images and what have you. And maybe not for all images because then you already have those. But this will help you maybe limp by if need be. And under the automation tab, which I want to really get into right now, is where we can really do some amazing things. So by default, these will all be off. We go in here and we can say, okay, well, on document open, as soon as a document opens, I want to export to IDML. I want the export path to be relative to input path. And I want to open in the default application. Press dialogues when possible, but I want that to be actually a specific application. And I can choose that by clicking here, and I chose this OX. There might be some people who actually want to do this, I like to do this a lot with bad files, so maybe it's a good way to just, for my workflow for helping people fix bad files, do this. So now when we close this, and we close this, and we drop, and use a slightly smaller file for time, drop on the IDMarkz, it exports, and there it opens right up in OX. So then we can see, actually, this is like a great way to see certain things about header and creator and all that kind of stuff. Like see here, it's IDML and etc. So you can see the power of this, and you have to make sure. One little problem I had is I was turning these preferences on and I was doing things I didn't understand. What you have to do is make sure you remember to turn these preferences off if you don't want to do the same thing every time. So now we want to turn this off, maybe have it open in default application, you can have it automatically open in InDesign, etc. So there's a very handy way under the automation feature to do some automations of not only opening in InDesign or some of the key ones we have, but also in completely different applications. It'd be very useful for tools that do accept IDML to automatically open them right up in here via these automation features for the exporting and opening of the files automatically. Same thing with PDFs. You could export as PDF and do automatic things. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to always, just a quick one here before we stop this part here, always open PDF in, and then we can choose. So by default, I like to open things in Preview, but I might want to open my professional work via IDMarkz in Acrobat. So I could just choose Open in Acrobat. So now when I drop this InDesign file on this book on there again, it's exporting the PDF in the background, and it will open it right up in Adobe Acrobat for us. And there we could go further to do whatever we need to do. What we could also do if we want to say always open the PDF in and choose Google Chrome, for instance. Maybe I want to just view the PDF in Chrome. It's a fine viewer. So now if we close that file again and we take the InDesign file once again and drop it on, you'll see now we get this file, InDesign file, created in the PDF and open for us automatically right up there in Chrome to be viewed and further reviewed or what have you. So just a little tip there. You could also say on export, I want to put it to a particular drive. So you can choose a drive you might have, and you could then connect to a drive or to your Box account or to your Google account or what have you. So now when and maybe I want to include with that also the things of each page. So now when I drop this file on there, you'll see here we get the IDML and the image previews of each page by page, ping export of the pages, and there's the IDML. So you see how powerful the advanced preferences can be to help you automate your workflow in various ways through IDML and the image formats and various other formats we export. All right, so we got a file in for this demonstration from somebody viewing right now, and I'll get you back whatever you like this file as after this demonstration. But just to show people how it works with a totally new file here, this InDesign file, we just drop it on IDMarkz. And we see that it's 247 pages. Looks like a big book here, So pretty cool. And it looks to convert pretty good. Let's see what's down here at the end. Photographs. So in any event, this is a cool way to get this file right here into various other formats. So if they want this in Publisher, we just click Open in Publisher. It's always a little bit keeps you on your toes when you're opening unknown files and new things, and look at that, it opens right up. Living the new life. And we see here we get everything, the foreword, the chapters, all of the text. It's all right in there. Linked, all linked. See that? It even takes the linked text boxes that was in InDesign and brings them over into Affinity. Isn't that cool? So this is a huge honker document, and you can see it works great. So I'll save this out. InDesign to multiple different file formats, proprietary file formats in many cases as well. It's a great way IDMarkz help you transition your InDesign files, but also help you to manage them in a visual way with IDMarkz. You get previews, to get like a live Preflight. That was really neat, huh? So you can like zoom right in and get all the details, and of course convert to completely different file formats. So I hope you really enjoyed that, and we're just going to round it off now. Yeah, it's really just incredible what you can do in IDMarkz. So I think this graphic sort of sums it up, hopefully, for you all. Yeah, it's fantastic. But don't believe what I say, what you just saw even. What do other customers, real customers using the product now, think of it?
Heart on fire. Set my heart afire.
So we're very thankful. We hope this event has been useful for you. If there's anything else you'd like to have answered that wasn't answered in the chat room, please just let us know on marketing@markzware.com or sales@markzware.com, and we can get right back to you with an answer. If you'd like to have a more detailed demonstration with some of your files or something like that, we can always do a one-on-one Zoom or a one-on-3 or 4, however many colleagues you want to include. And or Skype. Skype is working great too. We can Skype and share desktop and show you all kind of different things, or you can share desktop and show us what's going on. Thank you everybody for watching this event here. I hope you found it useful and that you're very interested in IDMarkz. For those that are interested in getting IDMarkz, we have a special offer. You're going to save 20% from watching this presentation. Use the coupon code InDesign 2. That's InDesign, all caps, and then the numeral 2, number 2, just InDesign number 2. And yeah, save 20% right over there on Markzware.com. Check out more of the product information over there on Markzware.com as well. We have lots of other resources. Thank you again for coming to this event. We really appreciate it. And we'll be having more of these events on other products coming up soon. For instance, the PDFMarkz, which is hopefully, by the time you're viewing this, out in beta. And if you're interested in beta testing PDFMarkz for basically everything what you just saw in this presentation, but then for PDF files, pretty interesting, right? Then email us on sales@markzware.com and we'll set you up with a beta version, special testing version for, I think it's a 3-month version. It's already very powerful right out of the beta box, so to speak. So anyway, once again, David Dilling on behalf of Markzware and everybody over on chat, and someone's chatting me right now on my iPhone. Have a great day. Thank you.